Hey everyone, before we start today's video, I'd just like to announce that the GoFundMe page that I had for Sam Died Today will be closing on April 14th. So if any of you would like to donate before it closes, then do so now because it's going to close soon. And I would like to thank everybody who's donated. The fact that I've even had $300 to the donations is just incredible, really. Like, never actually thought that there would be people in my life that would actually care enough to donate that much. But yeah, I mean, I was never naive about this donation stuff. I knew that I wasn't gonna get $1,000, but the fact that I got to like 300 was just so incredible. So thank you all so much for donating. Don't worry, the book is still coming out. It's just, if I had this money, I would have released it a lot sooner. But now that I have a bit of the money, I could probably publish this around the summer of this year. So look forward to that. Thank you all again so very much for donating. I really appreciate it, and you have no idea how thankful I am. Alright, back to the video. Hello everyone, it's me Goose, and it's high time that I make this video, because I'm a bitch, really. So, yesterday, or whenever the fuck I upload this, but Thursday of this week on April 6th? Yeah, April 6th is when Andromeda was dropped with a big, massive patch. Well, I don't know if it's massive, but it's a big patch that fixes basically every issue that people have had, every flaw, not every single flaw, but it fixes a majority of the glitches, and the facial animations were tuned up a little bit. It's not that great still, but the eyes look better and whatever. And you know, it's been bugging me. It's been bugging me when I heard about this patch, because I knew that when this patch was dropping, there was no way that people wouldn't actually still meme about this game and hate this game. Because, okay, like I said with my original video with Mass Effect Andromeda, a lot of people found it to be just not that great. A lot of people enjoyed the gameplay and all that stuff, but when it came to the story, and when people compared it to the old Mass Effect trilogy, they noticed that it was just a stark difference in narrative and storytelling and writing overall. And it was just like a disappointing thing, because I am a huge fan of Mass Effect. I've been playing the game since they first came out, and I've just been enthralled by the entire universe ever since. And when Mass Effect 3 dropped and basically tanked the entire fan base out of existence, you know, it just slowed down from there. So when I heard that Andromeda was coming out and, you know, it would be this continuation of the Mass Effect story and the universe, I was like, oh, awesome, that's great. Then you hear stuff like, oh, the story is actually kind of crap and whatever. And that's the thing about patches. You can patch as much as you like, but the one permanent thing that will never ever be patched out is the terrible, terrible writing of a game. Now, I'm not saying Mass Effect Andromeda has the worst story of 2017. There's so many games that are going to come out that I'm sure are going to have even shittier stories. But when it comes to patching, you will never be able to delete that one ending that people really hated. You will never be able to delete this dialogue tree that this main character has with this other main character. And it's been bugging me because it makes me realize that people in the gaming industry seem to undermine the aspect of what writing can do for your story. Now, video games don't need to rely on story or writing to make it a good game. It makes it more charming, it makes it more appealing, but it's not a necessary thing. There's a ton of video games out there with zero story or very cryptic stories that still are very successful and are still very fun to play. If I had to say, gameplay is always king. You know, it's always king above everything else. Graphics, whatever. As long as you have style, it'll look good. As long as it's 60 frames per second, it'll look fine. And story, yes, it can be in the bottom of the barrel. However, when you're making a giant RPG game like Mass Effect or like Final Fantasy 15, which I have criticized in the past, then you really need to think about the story, because what other motivation do I have? The gameplay can be fun, but when you're going back into the slow parts, back to the story, then what do I have to look forward to? Noctis talking to his friends? And I guess I'm just making this video because I made that Final Fantasy 15 review where I rail against the story for a good solid 15 minutes and barely even talk about the gameplay. And that's because the story was the key element. When it comes comes to games like Fallout 4 that also have this huge story, it doesn't really matter all that much because there are so many different branching stories. But again, even then, the main story, there's no motivation for it. You don't have to do it. It's a boring story and very forgettable, so you don't have to do it. Unlike Final Fantasy 15, where the entire goddamn gameplay is based solely around the story. When you're crafting a game as large as that, as big as that, then you're gonna need to craft a well-written story just as carefully as the game design or the soundtrack or the graphics. Like I said, it's not top priority, but it is something to think about when making a video game, because you'll never be able to patch out bad stories. You can be as flawed as you'd like when it comes to the gameplay or when it comes to the frame rate dips or, some other technical aspect. Because let's face it, games are very complicated nowadays. It's so difficult to actually test out every single bug that's in the game. And whenever there's a team dedicated to finding the bugs, they don't always mesh with the programmers and the developers. Sometimes the developers are just sick of hearing that there are so many goddamn bugs, so they won't fix them in time, and they'll just say, let's just do it in the patch. But you can't patch a bad story. It's that sort of thing that should be more carefully thought about in the future. I'm disappointed to see that BioWare, known as like the kings of Western RPGs, what with Mass Effect and Dragon Age Origins, have suddenly fallen. And you could blame EA and with their involvement and all that sort of shit. But by the end of the day, it's all about who you hire with these sort of things. But I guess in a sense, that's why writing in video games is such a difficult thing. It's always that one thing that is undermined. We have to build this entire world. What's the writer doing? He's just writing a story? Come on, man, he's not really doing shit. But you really have to consider what they're making of the game. If the writer says, hey, let's have this part, then somebody has to design the game to have it be like that part. Now, I'm not saying that the people who are making the game and coding it and programming it and all that stuff, I'm not saying they should worship the writer and adhere their words by law. Of course, I'm not being biased as a writer myself. I'm just saying that people just undermine it and just don't really think about it all that much nowadays. And I get it. There are a ton of bad writers out there. Some writers who are willing to put their own agendas in the game. Like, there are a few cases where in, like, for example, Baldur's Gate, there was a case where some of the writers were just extreme social justice warriors, where they just put in their transsexual character in there, and they're like, I'm trans and I'm proud, and it's that sort of thing that just kind of makes the gameplay experience just shit, because they're pushing their own agenda into the whole game. And especially with a game like Baldur's Gate that is based entirely around story, that kind of shit diminishes the effect that the storytelling is making. And now the whole issue about the whole transsexual thing, that's a whole nother video in itself. But my opinion on it is, you can't make a character like that that's just like, I'm trans, wow, look at me, transsexual, blah blah blah. I've heard some people defend that case, and maybe this is a very controversial opinion on my part, but I'm sorry, you can't have a character. You cannot have a character who is defined solely by their sexuality. It is literally the same as having a character who is solely based on their mood. Like, I'm happy character, I'm only happy, and that's the only thing you should know about me. But again, that's a whole nother video in itself. The point I'm trying to make is, writers in video games can be incredibly important to the development of the game. It is something you just can't fix when it's already said and done with. Once you ship that game, that story is the one thing everyone's going to remember. Persona 5 just came out, so everybody's going to remember the story of that game more so than they are the gameplay. The gameplay, yes, of course, it's going to be something that people are going to talk about. But let's face it, Atlas games, when it comes to RPGs they make, it's usually heavily based on the story. But hey, what do you guys think? I'm really just being, I guess, kind of biased about the whole writer thing, because yes, I am a writer, so it kind of infuriates me to see these kinds of people get away with shitty writing as if it's nothing at all to their story, or rather it's nothing at all to their games. Maybe I am being biased, honestly, maybe I am, but when I see that kind of shit, I'm just like, come on, man. You could do so much better. This is a fucking game with dignity, right? Isn't it? Like, Jesus Christ. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing and leave a like. Please leave a like. It gives me a lot of attention, and I like attention so much. All right, thank you all so very much for watching. I will see you all next time. I love y'all. Goodbye.